Today we'll discuss about the Battle of Trafalgar and the Battle of Waterloo of Napoleon Bonaparte. The Battle of Trafalgar, it's having an immense importance in French history. We all know that Napoleon Bonaparte, by his charismatic nature, he earned the epithet the Emperor of France. We cannot just ignore the power, the prestige, the vanity, everything of Napoleon Bonaparte for what he had just come to the power of the French administration. We should not forget that Napoleon Bonaparte, by a military coup or a military conquest that was occurred in the year of 1799, Napoleon Bonaparte came to the power by the 18th Brumaire in French history. Surely we can say that the pressure upon the French administration since 1799 created a big atmosphere in all around the French country, where Napoleon, he had just earned the epithet. Now somehow means from some books, from some references, we have just come to know that Napoleon, he once replied that the power must come from the barrels of guns. A person who can think like that, a person who can just say like that, the power must come from the barrels of gun, though it was not quite unnatural, as in the year of year since 1793, when Louis XVI, the king from the Bourbon dynasty, who was just guillotined, who was just executed, since that time it was not unnatural to us that the power must come from the barrels of guns. We know that France had been just going with a few difficulties with it. Sometimes we can just call it the internal crisis, sometimes we can just call it the external crisis. So during that time, to just be very passionate to govern or to just administer a particular country like that, like France, it was quite inevitable for Napoleon Bonaparte to just put the pressure upon the government. So for that reason, Napoleon Bonaparte, he just condemned the policies that were just introduced by Britain at the time. He considered that in his way, Britain can be most important enemy for her. So that's why Napoleon Bonaparte, he was very willing, he was very much enthusiastic to just defeat the Britain's navy or the naval power. Though it was quite a difficult task for him, but he did not just dare to fight against the British fleet. He wanted to just destroy few British vessels, but it was not possible for him, as because I have already told you that the power of the British Navy, it was very popular, it was very powerful, it was unconditionally good. So that's why it could not have been possible for Napoleon Bonaparte to just destroy all the British vessels. Perhaps he had just tried a lot. Let's see that what happened with Napoleon Bonaparte in the Battle of Trafalgar. Most importantly, you have to just remember that the Battle of Trafalgar, it was just fought in the year of 1805. It was fought between Napoleon Bonaparte and the English East India Company. And from the side of English East India Company, means the British power, Admiral Nelson was there, and he was very passionate in his power. The military conquest were an integral part of the Napoleon's plan for building an empire. Every time he just worked for it, he wanted to just build up a strong nation inside his country by his military power, by the military conquest. It means the muscle power. He wanted to just restore his power in France. Just before Napoleon crowned himself as the Emperor of France, a war broke out between England and France. So it would never be possible for him to just dominate Europe. He came to know that without dominating, without just defeating the British vessels or the British power, the British Navy, especially, it could not have been possible for him to just dominate the entire Europe, as because he wanted to just dominate entire Europe. So that's why Britain at the time, it could be the most important obstruction for him. So that's why he wanted to just reduce the power, he wanted to just remove the existing power and the prestige of Britain from the said post. So that's why he tried a lot. In the year of 1805, the British fleet under the command of Admiral Horatio Nelson met the French and the Spain fleet at a Cape of Trafalgar. So surely, children, you have just come to know, as because the battle, this was just occurred at the Spanish fleet at Cape of Trafalgar. So that's why it was renamed after the Battle of Trafalgar near the coast of Spain. In the Battle of Trafalgar, Nelson destroyed major portion of the French fleet, but not a single English ship was lost. In the Battle of Trafalgar, Nelson destroyed lots of French fleet. Means the French fleet, the French vessels were completely, means almost destroyed by Horatio Nelson, Admiral Horatio Nelson, but not a single ship, it could be just destructed by the French army, especially Napoleon Bonaparte, to the British. So means you can just guess, you can just imagine that how much powerful, means since the beginning of our topic I have been saying continuously that English means power, means the naval power, especially in navy, they were quite powerful. It could not have been possible for even Napoleon also, who was very passionate in war. It could not have been possible for him also to just destroy a single ship, a single fleet was just destroyed. What was the outcome? Okay, but not a single English ship was lost. England's victory in the Battle of Trafalgar made her undisputed master of the sea. So when England, he also just got the victory over this issue, as because Napoleon perhaps could not been possible to dominate to the British Isle. Means when the battle was going on, at least one fleet, at least one vessel could be just destroyed by France, by Napoleon Bonaparte during that time when the war was going on. As in, it was not possible for Napoleon Bonaparte, so it was made means the British Isle or the British Navy undisputed power in the entire continent, European continent. So this was the Battle of Trafalgar. You have just come to know. I'm just going to repeat the main points once again. That the Battle of Trafalgar, it was fought in the year of 1805 between the Admiral Horatio Nelson, he was the Commander General from the sides of English Isles, English Navy, and it was also just fought with obviously Napoleon Bonaparte from France. As because the battle, it was just fought at the Spanish fleet at the Cape of Trafalgar. So that's why this war was just renamed after the Battle of Trafalgar. It was fought in the year of 1805, and what was the most important outcome or the consequences of the Battle of Trafalgar? Not a single ship was lost from the sides of the Britain or the British side, but the major portions of the French army or the French isles were absolutely or completely just destroyed. So this incident or this event just marked in the history of the French army, French Navy. They were just completely massacred by this Battle of Trafalgar, and this war just proved to from the sides of the Britain or the British Navy that they held just undisputed power in the entire continent, I mean in Europe. Now our second topic is Napoleon's invasion of Russia. The fact is that we really don't know that being a very passionate soldier of French side, why did Napoleon just go for a war with several countries at the same time? I just cannot just get any satisfactory answer from this passage, but still we have just come to know in the year of 1807 a treaty was just signed between Napoleon Bonaparte and with Russia. From the Russian side, the Russian Tsar Alexander I, he was the then Tsar of Russia, means he was the head of the Russia at the time. So a treaty was just signed between Napoleon Bonaparte and Tsar Alexander I of Russia in the year of 1807. So what has happened that both they had just agreed upon that they will just not violate any kind of terms and conditions or the agendas of the treaty. But finally what has happened, as in the continental system that was just introduced by Napoleon Bonaparte to just make a naval blockade against the Britain. At the time Russia, Tsar Alexander I, he had just helped, he had just supported Napoleon Bonaparte in different ways. But certainly what has happened is because whenever he had just supported the naval blockade against Britain to just continue their trade with Britain, perhaps it could be seemed to him that it was not very much profitable, it was not very much lucrative for Russia. So that's why Russia became quite unenthusiastic, as because that could just hamper the trade and the commerce and the business purpose of the Russian economy, the economic proportionate ratio or the GDP rate that just went into ruin within a very short span of time for Russia. So that's why, ignoring the continental system that was just promulgated by Napoleon Bonaparte earlier, Russia wanted to just continue the trade and commerce with Britain once again, and that disheartened Napoleon Bonaparte so much. So that's why Napoleon Bonaparte, he sought to think that I should just go for a war with Russia. Even the Tsar of Russia, Alexander I. In the year of 1812, Napoleon Bonaparte, he was having a direct conflict or the contradiction with Russia, Tsar Alexander I. And finally what has happened, children, Russia, by the size or the diameter or the area, Russia was huge at the time, just like India, we can say the subcontinent also. So Tsar Alexander I, he sought to think that Napoleon, as because he has just got angry, he has been just disappointed with my decision, so he is on anger, he can just do anything with us. But the harsh winter of the Russia, means Moscow, Siberia, you have just I think you have just come to know these names from your geography books. So the harsh winter just prevails over there. For that reason, this was the advantage of the Russian army, even for the Russian Tsar Alexander I. He wanted to just take this privilege or the opportunity to just defeat Napoleon Bonaparte. And finally what has happened, Napoleon Bonaparte, when he just wanted to just enter in the Russian side in the year of 1812. In the year of 1812, the Moscow expedition, it was just occurred. The Russian expedition, it was also just named like the Moscow expedition, as because we all know that the Moscow is the capital of Russia. So when Napoleon Bonaparte, thinking, ignoring all the facts, all the harsh truth that was very true at the time, he had just ignored all this, as because he was on fire at the time. He wanted to just defeat Russia at any circumstances. His only intention was to just defeat Russia. He couldn't just think anything else. He couldn't just check his power, his own military success, everything. He just went for a war with Russia. But Russia was very clever. I mean, Tsar Alexander I, he was very clever at the time. He had just sort of think that to just defeat Napoleon Bonaparte, I have to just take the several policies. For that reason, he had just undertaken the policies, and the policy came to be known as the scorched earth policy. In Bengali, this is termed as Pora Matir Niti. Exactly, this is called as Pora Matir Niti, by which every single resource must be just burnt out, so that the enemies or the opposition could not be able to just reuse or the use of all the resources. So everything was just burnt down by Tsar Alexander I. And when the Napoleon's army, they just wanted to just enter inside the country of Russia for the first time, they just entered without having any obstruction, any obstacles. But finally, when they wanted to just reach out Moscow, they could not just ignore the harsh winters, because they were not habituated with this harsh winter. First of all, the food was not available. The food became scanty. The water was not available. The paddy, the wheat, anything, any food resources was not available, as because by implementing the scorched earth policy, everything was just smashed. It was just what can I say? It was just burnt out. So that's why it was not possible for the military army from the sides of Napoleon Bonaparte to just continue their movement. So the Moscow expedition, it failed to achieve any momentum. And ignoring the fact and the terms and conditions of the Treaty of Tilsit that was signed in the year of 1807 between Napoleon Bonaparte and Tsar Alexander I, it was the biggest mistake of Napoleon Bonaparte, the Moscow expedition. I must say that the Moscow expedition of Napoleon Bonaparte in the year of 1812, that was the biggest mistake for him. After the very next year, means in the year of 1813, the Battle of Nation became one of the most important reasons for the defeat of Napoleon Bonaparte, as because Napoleon Bonaparte, at the same time, he just had went war with several countries at the same time, and that sealed the fate of Napoleon Bonaparte permanently. And we know that what has happened after the Battle of Nations, as because Napoleon Bonaparte was badly defeated in the Battle of Nations in the year of 1813. The very next year, in the year of 1814, he was sent for an exile. It was at Elba, but he had just remained over there for 100 days. So he had just remained over there, and he just came back within a very short span of time. He could not just live long over there, so that's why he just came back to his own territory, to his own country, means France, and he had just ruled over there 100 years. So that's why this remaining, or this consisting ruling history of France came to be known as the 100 Days of Napoleon Bonaparte, as because after just coming back from Elba, he had just ruled France for 100 days only. So that's why this was just termed as the 100 Days of Napoleon. And in the year of 1815, in the Battle of Waterloo, Napoleon was badly defeated by Duke of Wellington, and Napoleon was sent back to the St. Helena Island, where he had just died at the age of 51. I think it was in the year of 1821. Thank you, children. Stay home, stay safe.